Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage your MC, Chief Marketing Officer for Mitel Westeros.
Are you guys ready for round two? Here we go. Our first speaker is Amy McLeod, and Amy is our communications chief here at Mitel. And this topic is really pretty important to her because as you think, what does it media cover these days? It's security, it's mobile, it's cloud. Those are the topics that are written about every single day. So Amy gets a ton of questions on this. We made the acquisition of Mavenir just over a year ago. People ask why. I think you heard today, and you've heard over the last year in terms of how we see these worlds coming together. In fact, Dr. Magnuson, I think, was one of the first to actually write a white paper on this topic in 2010 at Texas A&M in terms of how these worlds are coming together. So our next topic is all around 5G, and what the heck does this mean to the enterprise? And it is going to transform what happens, how we work as individuals, and really how we interact with our customers in a completely different way. So with that, let me please welcome to the stage our communications chief, Amy McLeod.
Good morning, everyone. That was a great session this morning, really talking about the future and some big thought leadership topics that Mitel is addressing for us, for our partners and our customers. We're going to take a little bit of a different tact right now and talk a little bit about 5G. You will all remember, it was exactly as Wes said, a year ago this month, where we made a major move into mobile with the acquisition of Mavenir. And it's brought a whole new lexicon to Mitel, a whole new line of thought and discussion that we talk about in the media, and is really starting to shape the way the market is looking at us. And so we thought we'd take this opportunity, with you here all gathered, to slow it down long enough and do a little bit of a 5G 101. This is a brand new, brave new world for many of us, particularly those of us who came to this point from the enterprise side. So what is 5G? What does it mean to the enterprise? And we want to just take a little bit of time to debunk some of the information that you might be hearing. We take strategic planning at Mitel very seriously. You saw Rich talk about it a couple of times. It is a detailed and disciplined process. Kicks off, I think, next month, and it runs through October. It is a 6-month cycle where we kind of lift up the rocks in the market and see what's happening with the trends, with the market demand, with the competitive landscape. And we do that in consultation with some of the best industry analysts that we have, so that we don't just see the world according to Mitel, but we see the world according to the way the market sees it. And we're delighted to have those folks join us today to help us walk through this 5G 101 and what it means for the enterprise. Please join me in welcoming Zeus Caravella. Zeus is the founder and primary analyst at ZK Research. He is a noted authority on communications transitions and mobile technologies, frequently commentated in the media and with the financial analysts, and we're delighted to have him here today. Thanks, Zeus. Joining us as well is Sheila McGee-Smith from Sheila McGee-Smith Analytics, also a noted authority on our industry space, particular expertise in customer journey and contact center technologies. Formerly Dun & Bradstreet as well, so has that financial perspective on what this all means to our markets as well. Thanks for coming, Sheila. And finally, we're joined by our very own Terry McCabe, who you've seen a couple times today already. He's our mobile maverick at Mavenir. We put him out whenever we can. He helps us make sense of it in Mitel. He's certainly been a great thought leader for many of us in Mitel as we've kind of come to terms with what this means to Mitel and what it means to our customers and partners. So thank you all for joining us. Absolutely. Skip one. So really, I mean, this is an interesting landscape that we're in right now with a whole different lexicon than we're used to. All kinds of new acronyms, 5G, IoT, VoLTE, voice over Wi-Fi, M2M, goes on and on and on about with the languages that, you know, kind of, for me anyway, the least technical person in Mitel, often feel overwhelming and a little bit confusing. So I wanted to slow it down a little bit and just start with the basics. 5G, what is it? Zeus, can you walk us through some thoughts?
Sure. So 5G is obviously the next generation wireless technology. You can tell because it's one more G than the old one, right? So just right there, being 25% more Gs, it's got to be better. But in all seriousness, if you look at the wireless industry, about every 8 to 10 years, it goes through its next evolutionary step. And 2G brought digital, 3G brought actual usable data, 4G saw the rise of mobile apps because of speed, and 5G is really a much different paradigm in wireless. It's I think of it as a much bigger leap from 4G to 5G than 3G was to 4G, because it's not just a speed upgrade. Everything is IP based, and that means you can do a lot of cool things with voice and data. You can move to wideband audio, things like that. It becomes much easier to integrate applications. It's much faster, and I've seen some stats about if you were to download a movie, like the new Star Wars movie using 3G, it would take you about a day. So in that time, you could fly to Singapore and back. On 4G, it would take you a couple hours to do that, and with 5G, it's literally 6 minutes. So if you're a good runner, maybe go out and run a mile, come back, and your movie's downloaded. You can start watching it. But in addition to speed, the latency characteristics are much better. And so if any of you have ever tried to download something over a 4G connection, you'll notice at the beginning it's really, really slow, and that's because it's trying to close that TCP window. It doesn't really, it's much more of a true IP network, and it's much faster, and latency goes down, which is really important for the types of communications that Mitel offers, right, with voice and video. So the vision of voice over Wi-Fi, video over, or voice over LTE, video over LTE actually becomes real. I think another important characteristic of 5G is it's an amalgamation of all the other wireless technologies before it, and you're able to throttle the network up and down when needed. So right now, one of the reasons why 4G isn't really a practical technology for IoT applications, it is for some, but for an application like, say, HP makes a printer, and once a day it wants to send information on how low the toner is. Well, they're not going to pay $5, a month or whatever to have a SIM card buried in there to be able to do that, but that's what you have to do today because that's a pricing model. With 4G, or 5G, the carriers can actually retire those old networks and start changing the pricing model of how this works and move to more pay by the bit, things like that. So where 2G speeds are needed, it can do that. Where 3G is needed, it can do that. And so by application, the network can behave differently. So it serves all the way to the high-end communication type applications to the very, very low-end things like sensor connectivity. And so if you flip the slide, what 5G is going to enable us to do is create this world where we can literally connect everything over wireless. And that's much different than we have today. We showed a lot of stats over cloud. And the cloud's to me, mobile and cloud go hand in hand. And the reason the cloud works is because the network is fast enough to allow us to use the cloud to be able to access data and applications, right? And so you think about even on our consumer lives, something like iTunes, right? You download it once and then it's available on all your devices. You wouldn't do that if it took you 6 hours to download whatever that content was. It wouldn't be practical. But the faster networks get, now the easier it is for us to be able to just have our content wherever we want. So if I'm a field service person and I need to be able to grab some data, I don't have to carry it with me. If I'm a salesperson in the field, I don't have to think about what's the latest version of the PowerPoint that I had. I can keep it maybe in a Dropbox and just go get it when I need it. And it truly allows us to move to this world where I go get it when I need it, right? Because of the speed and latency characteristics. And the fact is in addition to those types of things, we're going to be connecting. IoT was a bit of a theme this morning. Literally billions of sensors. And I don't really care if the number is 20, 50, 200. It's a lot, right? It's a lot of sensors being connected, a lot of devices being connected, and it's going to truly change the world that we live in. If you just go to the last slide. And so from a benefits perspective, there's a lot of cool consumer type applications that you can think of, but I think there were real benefits to the enterprise as well. One of them is when you move to an all wireless type of infrastructure, now all of a sudden you untether the traditional shackles of having to be wired. And if you're a retailer now, if you want to be able to offer services directly in a mall instead of in the store, you can do that. If you're a field service person or even, say, a mechanic even, right, some small business, you could take services to the customer. You already see some prototypes today with insurance companies starting to change the way you do business. So when you remove the restriction of having to have content and the person be local because of the network being fixed, you can literally change everything. And I think it has some profound impacts on customer service. And if you want to get really visionary, right, when at those types of speeds, now we can start introducing things like, flying drones with cameras, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, right? And start using all of those things for customers to change the way they interact with customers. And so I think when you project out, 7, 8 years from now, and you think about bringing all those technologies together in a perfect storm, 5G is at the center of it because it enables all those technologies to work with one another, but we are going to dramatically change the way we work, the way we play, the way we service customers, and I think it's just going to create a much better way of life for everybody because things will be more automated. And the big thing for this audience is to think about if you lived in a world where everything was connected, how would that change the way you do things? And for a lot of people, it's very, very difficult to imagine what that is. But I think that's the kind of thought process we need to start thinking about now. And 5G is the core of that.
Thank you, Zeus. We're going to come back to the timeline in a little while because, we want to understand exactly when that's going to happen. But great jumping off point, Sheila, for the world that you live in, which is really customer experience, customer service. How do we make that better? And, everybody in here has got at least one device on them. Apps are the way of the future, clearly having an impact in customer experience and expectation. Can you talk us a little bit through your view of what 5G is going to do for the customer experience?
Absolutely. Thanks, Amy. And great setup by Zeus because, as somebody who's more into the enterprise applications and less on the network side, it is important for those of us who are more app-focused to understand what's coming, right, and how it's going to enable what we want to do. So my graphic is taken from the smartphone has changed everything in customer experience. So I've been doing contact center since 1990. The first report I wrote was ACDs in the 90s, right? Because that's what we called them then, right? We called them ACDs. And as early as 1995, we were saying email was going to change the world, right? In terms of customer service. Everything's going to go email. Don't worry about it. We don't need voice contact centers anymore, right? And then after that, it was web chat. Web chat's going to change the world. We don't need voice agents anymore. We just need web chat. And then more recently, social. There was this huge well and cry that social was going to change the world. What has happened, though, in this intermediary, this 20 years, is that the combination of all of those digital channels really is changing customer experience. And we have gotten to that tipping point just now in 2016, where 50% of the interactions coming into contact centers are no longer voice. They are something else. Now, we don't need any fear-mongering on that, right? That, contact centers are going away because there's no voice agents. A lot of these applications still require backup by agents, right? We still need voice agents. We still need them to answer the texts, to do the emails, right? But I think for several years, contact centers have been able to say, you know what? Nothing is changing the world yet, right? So I can just be really good on voice. And we as a business, we have done a great job on voice. So if you look at first call resolution statistics for voice, they're really high. They're 75, 80%. If you look at them for email, if you look at them for web chat, they're lower. Because we as an industry, we as users have not had as much time doing it and haven't spent as much effort perhaps perfecting it the way we need to. So what are the ways we need to perfect it? Brian this morning talked about recording every call, right? Well, if we don't do enough with that data, then we're not doing the best that we can for all of the channels, if we're not hearing those messages. If we're not using a workforce management system, for example, that takes into account digital channels. How many? I'm not going to do a show of hands, but a lot of companies, a good percentage of companies, still using workforce management systems that are voice only. And the email and the chat are just sort of on the side, and we do that with an Excel spreadsheet. But the technologies are here now, and the traffic is coming in to the point that we have to do a better job with how we respond to digital interactions. How does it tie into our topic? And as you said, we're going to come back to timing. A lot of 5G is 2020, but everything that's happening is a progression. It's going to be an evolution. What we're not doing well today is just going to get magnified if we don't start really organizationally as well as technologically addressing this digital interaction change. So
That's kind of in line with what Rich was talking about, adapt or die.
Yeah.
Right away,
Yeah.
right? You've got to start thinking now. I mean, Terry, one of the things that the second pillar of our strategy at Mitel is the cloud. Certainly, we're number one in the world in terms of business cloud communications, and very proud of that. What is the relationship between the cloud and 5G?
Well, I think we've heard already, 5G enables more and more of what is done to be carried out in the cloud. I think it's no accident that if you saw the announcement about Intel, making reductions in their business because the PC industry, the whole desktop industry is being, quite frankly, decimated. The idea that people will have a desktop computer that contains data and processing and applications, that is fading. You yourself, you're using a tablet. It's got less processing, less computing. Why? Because more and more of what you do is in the cloud. Well, that's happening from an enterprise application perspective. But you start to look at all of those other systems, all of those other things that are going on. Look at vehicles, look at smart homes. Are you going to put a smart home controller into your home, or are you simply going to have sensors that are placed through the home? And as new capabilities become available, it's a lot easier to upgrade, to re-implement, redevelop things in that cloud than it is to go out to all of these points of presence wherever they may be. Part of the reason, or part of the way that we've always talked about the cloud in business, is it allows you to aggregate applications, have a more effective and more cost-effective data center. But in truth, the big difference is that it allows you to move more quickly. It allows you to upgrade your applications, your customer experience, and do that in one place, but propagate that change to everyone who consumes that. And you see, the consumer experience and the way that consumers behave. I'll give you an example, a very practical one. Do you really make appointments to meet people anymore in your private life? You give them your mobile number and you connect with them wherever, whenever. You don't have, I'm meeting you at 4 o'clock. Well, I'll be there around 4 o'clock and maybe I won't. And you don't make a plan anymore. Well, you do that in your private life. You use messaging, you may use voice calls. What you use is less important. The behavior has changed. People expect that now from their interactions with an enterprise. You expect not to have a fixed point in time and space where you interact with a business. You expect it to happen wherever, whenever you want it. You want an on-demand world. 5G really is just that progression that allows us to be more pervasive, to have more data about your environment, and to have that as actionable data in the cloud that can help shape interactions with the customer.
But more importantly, the speeds of it, though, allow the cloud to actually become that repository.
In real time.
If it's too slow,
Yep.
then businesses can't move with speed. But at 5G speeds, and even 4.5G to some extent, whenever we see that, it would make it's more economical to leverage the cloud as a way of storing content, data, and applications than it is to deploy it on-prem.
Well, and the way that it changes, what it changes is the real-time accessing versus keeping things in like CRM databases, right? Today, if you call into a contact center, they're relying on data that may have been like a month old. And with 5G, we're able to more easily, right, in real time, update everything like that customer journey.
Well, and then ultimately, it's pulling in data from other sources as well, right?
Yep.
So it's a natural evolution that builds on each other. Nobody needs to be frightened that cloud's going away. It's a natural evolution and actually an enabling technology for 5G.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And from another perspective, cloud is actually going to be the implementation technology behind. It's not, it enables the cloud for applications, but if you're interested in the network itself, cloud radio technologies and software-defined radios are the enabling technology that allow us to build 5G and roll it out quickly.
Well, I've
Right,
said for
and-
years, cloud drives mobile, mobile drives cloud. The two are inherently linked.
So let's take that conversation to the next step. What is the relationship then between the enterprise network and the mobile network, knowing that cloud's a part of it? Yes.
I think they become blended, and the demarcation between what is a mobile network and what is my enterprise network start to go away. And I think it's a little strange even today. We talk about remote access and in office. It's just access. We just connect, right? And it has a lot of implications for security and where I put data sovereignty issues. But ultimately, 5G enables from the core to the hand connectivity, right? All the way from your data center all the way to your mobile device or even sensor. So I think the lines of where my enterprise network starts really start to blur. And the cloud does that in a lot of ways too, because the cloud has in many ways become an extension of my enterprise. And there's still a lot of challenges in trying to manage data and how we move workflows around and stuff, but those are being overcome. But to me, the key is, so think about it this way, IoT, mobility cloud, they're network-centric compute paradigms. So almost by definition, the network has to play a very strategic key role in that. And it can't do that if it doesn't have the necessary speed and reliability characteristics. And 5G certainly has been built for a world where everything's connected, right?
You talk about paradigms. If you think about customer care, I still, talk to a lot of businesses every day who say, very great case in point. I was talking to a company who said we have 8,000 agents, okay? And we're thinking about moving our technology to the cloud, and we're talking about some of the options for that. And I said, well, what are you doing with email? What do you do with web chat? Oh, that's a different department, right? Literally, 8,000 seat bank, that's a different department. Business applications handles that. 5G is going to mean that the customer is no longer going to be your customer if that's the way you treat the world, right? Today, already we have this situation, people talk about omni-channel. What does that mean? I prefer customer journey, but let's just talk about it for a second. Omni-channel means if I'm on the phone with an agent, I expect them to be able to text me information in real time, simultaneously, to use multiple channels. That expectation is going to grow as we move toward 5G. And they're able to do multiple tasks at the same time and look at POs and look at, so the extent to which organizations today aren't ready for 5G is a little bit scary. Talking to a customer like that with 8,000 agents. And so, again, we talk about timing. I'm so tempted in a situation like that to talk to the IT guy and say, you guys have to start an organizational movement, a team. How could you be this big and not have that? I feel it's like incumbent upon me to say, it is time to get in a room with that guy from Business Apps who handles the e-gain and the web chat.
And I think there's another part to this which is even more potentially dramatic across both the enterprise and what we would traditionally think of mobile networks, because there's a whole business model transformation here. I've been talking to a few carrier CTOs recently, and
as you do.
I'm compelled from time to time, and their vision of the future includes making available slices of that 5G network to specific mission-critical applications. If you look at how vehicle telemetry and in-vehicle systems are going to operate, it is not going to be a mobile carrier who is defining the standards and the way in which the sensors and the real-time interactions within that vehicle happen. It is going to be the automotive industry. And what you're going to see is slices of the network becoming operated on behalf of the enterprise and becoming an extension of the enterprise network environment. And you'll see that across many industry segments where you have large global players who will go to different markets and obtain a slice of that 5G network that they can dedicate with service level agreements and specific QoS tied to their needs.
Right, which you can't really do over 4G.
I want to throw a question to Terry. I was talking to somebody during the break, somebody who was here in the room, and they are with an energy company, right? That has crews out all over the world, in Africa, in very remote places. And the challenge that they have is voice communications, different data plans, different voice plans. Is 5G going to do anything to support that kind of an issue?
And that's something that we had, well, again.
When you talked about slicing by,
This is one of the concepts we've been talking about where you create an enterprise virtual operator, which can then have a globally consistent set of services for voice, video, messaging, and data, which is offered to their employees globally. And it either is a traditional MVNO model or a slice of that mobile network in each one of the territories that they're active in. And that, if you are a globally scaled organization and you have mission critical services that you want to provide consistently, there's huge benefits in that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, obviously it's a big problem today.
Absolutely,
It's like-
absolutely.
So we've talked a little bit and around the timing, because I mean, it's a great theoretical discussion of the possibilities of 5G, but when and how is a really practical answer that I think we need to talk about. GSMA, and we just came back from Mobile World Congress in February, big mobile show in Barcelona, sort of saying 2020. Years away or today, all of these things that we're talking about?
Well, it's both. I mean, the technology itself is 2020, but I think, to Sheila's point, I think companies need to start truly thinking mobile first, and most don't do that. I did a CTO panel in New York a couple of months ago, and I had 20 financial services CTOs there, and only one of them admitted that they really felt they were mobile first, and she did that by splitting her IT organization into two groups. Ones that thought mobile first, and the other group she called legacy IT. I don't know about you. I don't know if I'd want to work in a group called legacy IT. I think the writing's on the wall for that, right? But to me, that means thinking about my apps differently, right? I spoke at Microsoft Tech Ed last year on the concept of mobile apps, and it was pretty clear that traditional software developer thinks of mobile devices having some serious limitations on screen size, no keyboard, no mouse control, where they should be thinking more about the unique attributes of the mobile device. You have an accelerometer, compass, GPS, location info. And if you can build apps with those things integrated into it, you can change the behavior of an app. So for instance, with an airline app, if it's an hour before my flight, right, I'm at the airport, what do you think I want when I log in? Don't make me go hunt for the info. Tell me what gate I'm at and show me a map. Even give me some augmented reality where I hold it up and show me an arrow, go this way to go catch my flight. Right? And we're starting to get there, but I think those are the things where there's a big difference between having small form factor apps that run on mobile devices and uniquely mobile applications. And I think the big challenge for companies today is to sort of get out of this mode of yesterday and thinking browser first and Windows first, and really thinking about, if I were going to live in a mobile first world, what would that look like? So you start implementing that today, and then 2020 is not all that, far, away, right?
No,
I mean,
yeah.
the technology's going to be here before we know it.
And it reminds me, we talked a little bit about the strategic planning process at Mitel, and it was not long ago, I would say 3-4 years ago, when we started that process and we were trying to figure out what's going on in the market and started to talk to our analyst friends and found out that, boom, overnight, there were 140 cloud service providers in the US in about 8 months. Is it going to be like that, Sheila? Is it the same speed?
I guess the way I was thinking about it is, as Zayas was talking, is, when I talk to groups of customers sometimes about customer journey, it seems like this, trying to map customer journey seems like a huge project, right? And I always say, step back. If you were to talk to, half a dozen of your supervisors or managers and ask them what the top 3 journeys are in their contact center, they could tell you in 10 minutes, right? So I'm almost thinking that this is like that. You start with the things that are supported well with the mobile technology that we have today. Make sure you're supporting that mobile user today as well as you can. And what's going to happen is the ability to do more and more journeys, more complex journeys, to support those journeys that your customers on is going to get better and better. But first, step back and let's do the simple ones.
Yeah.
Let's do the easy ones.
Do what you know first.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I also think, let's recognize, yes, standards take time. Building out mobile networks takes time. 2020 is when the standards will be available and the first commercial true 5G networks will be turned up. Now, it may be that cloud technologies and the implementation of those networks will make it a faster process. But typically, the lead time of building out a nationwide coverage footprint for a new technology is measured in years. Now, smaller markets, smaller countries, if you're in Singapore, that can take a year. If you're the United States, you're talking 4, maybe 5 years to build out that footprint. What I think has already happened that's critical to this transformation is that separation or disaggregation of the services from the carrier network. You now have a 4G network, but you also have a Wi-Fi network. And that Wi-Fi network's fast evolving. And let's not forget Wi-Fi as an instrumental part of delivering digital services as we move forward. It's not going away, and it is part of that overall heterogeneous network of networks, which is the basis of any mobile application, any new device technology. And the services you create on top of that aren't coming from standards organizations. They're not, 50-year-old guys with beards sitting in a room anymore. That's the way it used to be. But now it's app developers creating that.
It's two guys in a garage.
Exactly. Or it's Google investing at a web scale. It's, you look at what Uber has done. They have totally transformed an industry. And now they're moving on to other spaces. Recently in Asia, all the scooter taxis have all become Uberized. Not just that, they've branched out. They're no longer just delivering human beings from place to place. They've become courier companies. They now deliver food. You can go to an app.
They actually shut that down.
Well, in Jakarta, it was
in the
working
US,
2
yeah.
weeks ago. Like you can get your Starbucks delivered to you in your office.
Yeah.
But now they've branched out further. You can have the scooter taxi guy go clean your house. He'll come, collect the keys, go clean your house, and then bring you back the keys.
You ever seen those scooter guys? I wouldn't do that.
That's the one I mean.
Wait, there's no scooter drivers out here. Right?
But I'm just highlighting the fact that, you don't, the way these innovations are happening, they're not coming from Fortune 500. They're coming from smart people who can have an idea and transform it into action. And maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but it can have a viral effect, and incredibly quickly what happens in one city spreads.
Uber's a good case because people think about how they disrupted the taxi industry, but they actually added to it, right? So you can book cars with bike racks in Portland. You can book helicopters in Dubai. As you mentioned, tuk-tuks in Singapore, right? So it's not only, it's taken what was a very siloed industry, very capital intensive, and made it very dynamic. So you could literally add whatever you want. I mean, you could, in theory, book boats, whatever you wanted through it. So they've changed the dynamics of actually what was a very commodity-based business that hadn't changed in 100 years.
So think about it. Think about how cellular has changed. It's cellular, really, that Uber is based on, right? What will 5G do? What can 5G enable in terms of industry change and changing business models? And that's what people have to start thinking about, right? Especially IT professionals in enterprises.
Well, and Sheila, it's a great segue into the section I wanted you to talk about was really IoT. We've talked about it several times this morning already. We talk about it frequently. It's already a reality.
Right.
But what is 5G going to do to the IoT experience? How is that going to change things? Like, it's very complicated and only getting more complicated.
Yeah, I wanted to step back. I mean, obviously, Internet of Things has been talked about a lot today. And it's funny, I used to have a graphic on this page of a Fitbit, right? With somebody with a Fitbit on their wrist. But the title was, it's not just Fitbits anymore. And so I decided we needed more information on what is it now beyond Fitbits. And again, I've done, I'm actually going to do a show of hands here. How many people in this room have, in their business, have an Internet of Things project going on that they're aware of? Some sort of IoT project. And I'm seeing about 20%, which is pretty typical, right? So this is already happening. Businesses are seeking to understand what it's going to mean, what it can enable for them. The graphic here is showing that there's an organization that's actually keeping track of the types of connected devices. And they have listed, and it's probably not the whole population, but already over 4,000 devices in 73 different categories. And I just chose some of these categories. Again, we think about things like heartbeat and things that Fitbit do. But there's so many things in industrial businesses. Again, thinking about the woman who's in energy and oil and gas, the various kinds of things that can be done in that kind of environment with sensors and such. I mean, the ability to connect all of those is going to have an impact both on the business model, as with Uber, and on customer service.
See, where 5G comes into this, though, is a lot of these devices, like even Fitbit's a good example, it's a Bluetooth connection that tethers off your phone. A lot of devices, it's too expensive to put a SIM card in, right? And
It's
Intel's
Wi-Fi in the home, to a large extent, for smart
right.
home.
And so in an effort to create better connectivity, we've got all these parallel networks being built, Sigfox, LoRa, these other low power ones. And as I mentioned with 5G, it's a tunable technology. So if I want low bandwidth, low power, I can do that. If I have high bandwidth, and maybe power is not an issue, I can do that as well. So these things now can start natively connecting back to the source instead of always having to tether off of something, which quite frankly really limits the usability of them in a lot of ways.
I think they're a hobby. To be honest, you have a huge amount of hobby. There's a lot of us here. We will put up with the nonsense, the Bluetooth connectivity that doesn't always work, or the Wi-Fi device that has to be repowered every now and then. But if you're really going to embed this in your business processes and it's mission critical, if it's a healthcare, if it's not about you trying to persuade yourself you're doing something about your health, but is actually a healthcare professional monitoring you meaningfully, then that needs to work out of the box and reliably. And
But
that's
again,
what 5G can do.
It's funny that you say that. I was talking to a company in the space, in the customer experience space last week, and I said, "Are you doing anything yet on Internet of Things?" And they said that they had a proof of concept going with an actual company where they are monitoring health devices, but that what happens if something goes wrong in terms of drug levels, monitoring something is two processes get set off. A drone is set off to drop a defibrillator at the site that can be used, and at the same time, they simultaneously get the nearest ambulance, again, based on the metrics, the GPS metrics, and get that to the place. So that's how people are beginning to think. That's where you have to start, doing these proof of concepts, having these sessions, and in the customer experience space, with the contact center, with the agents, with the supervisors. What are the issues that are coming up that we can start proactively handling? I mean, John Britton talked this morning a lot about analytics, and it's going to be this combination of analytics, big data, managing that data and feeding it in. Internet of Things is going to create even bigger data. I mean, even crazy.
Well, and the healthcare example is a good reason why native connectivity is important, because if I'm wearing a healthcare monitor, like a Fitbit is today, I don't want the patient to have to sync to phone in order to upload the contact info.
It needs to be there continuously.
And that's what 5G will change.
For sure. So we've got a few minutes left, and I want to really bring it back to some practical advice for our audience today. If we look forward, we've talked about the timeline, 2020, it's Monday morning, Amy gets up to go to the office. What's different about my business experience in a 5G world? CS, let's start with you.
Sure, I think things will be more automated, so there will be a lot more knowledge of what you're doing. So I think your day will start off where you wake up, you 3D print a coffee cup, right? You pour yourself a cup of coffee that probably was 3D printed as well, and you can do that today. You hop in your self-driving car, you put on your Microsoft HoloLens or some version of that, and all of a sudden you start getting information on all the meetings that you're going to be attending, things that happen with certain customers overnight, maybe outages, globally if you're in charge of the cloud platform, things like that you need to know, right?
Not Mitel.
Yeah. Well, but it could be a service provider in an area that had the outage, right? So things like that. So and people think HoloLens and VR things are gamers only, but if you just go on YouTube and look up HoloLens and customer service, there's a ton of examples of prototypes they've developed. But I think what happens is there'll be so much data out there, the analytics become important to be able to filter through that data and understand what to push to you. So it's no longer a world where I have to go get the info. It'll start being pushed to me while I'm sitting in my self-driving car. I can study that on the way. When I walk into the office, I'll be able to sit down and whatever meeting I'm attending will just pop up automatically. I'll interact with that customer, et cetera, et cetera. And I think a lot of what we do just becomes much more automated and streamlined. And when you think about it in the workplace, how much human latency is involved in what you do, checking calendars, all of that goes away.
So Rich talked a little bit earlier about, one touch to connect. Sounds like it's no touch to connect.
It's no touch to connect, right? And so I've heard the expression, the best UI is no UI.
No UI.
Right,
Interesting. Sheila, same question. I mean,
In the contact center world, I think we get much closer by 2020 to the point where if you want to reach out to a business, let's say I want to reach out to, actually Lenovo, I'm having a problem with my laptop right now.
Really? That's a shock.
Actually, the laptop's fine, I'm missing a couple of screws. But anyway, I want to reach out to Lenovo. And instead of just this blind call into Lenovo, Instead, my mobile app lets me know who's available and what their profile looks like. So for this particular question, I've already tried to escalate it. So I want somebody who's a little bit more sophisticated. And so it's also going to tell me I can get somebody who's like a tier 1 in 10 minutes, or I can get a tier 2 to call me back in 20 minutes. I'm going to do that, right? Because all of that information, and that tier 2 may not be in the contact center. And that tier 2 or tier 3 person may just be in the business, and he makes himself available, for 2 hours a day. And I'm fine waiting for that. So I think what's going to happen in terms of how you manage the contact center, a lot of that has already moved to web-based applications, right? But I think what we're going to find is an influx of more enterprise users becoming part of the contact center, to the points that were being made this morning by Rich, that the contact center isn't a place, it's going to be an activity that's done by more people, and I think 5G is going to enable that more people to be part of that expanded team.
I'll give one simple, small example. I think if you look at let's say, the very limited capability that is Siri or Google's equivalent today.
Or Echo.
Yeah.
What about Cortana? You forgot about her.
Oh, she's terrible.
I'm not a Microsoft person, But you look at these solutions and you look at where they are today, and they really are very limited, but they give you an inkling as to what's possible. They can become that invisible user interface, the way in which you can work with your technology. Science fiction often shows you snippets of what will become real, and this idea that you simply talk to the technology and interact with it as if it were a human being.
Well, Alexa does that today, right? With Amazon, right?
But it is getting better and better, and it's based on cloud and connectivity, because you can't and won't do that embedded in a device. You'll do that in the cloud, and that's how you'll interact with, how much of what we do has changed, because today you don't think about the answer to a question. You don't guess something anymore. You're watching TV, you're watching YouTube, you look it up in real time. You now interact with data in a completely different way, and we haven't noticed that change. In some sense, it's dumbed us down. Well, I think that sort of experience, the personal assistant that takes the friction out of your everyday life, is the way that this technology will gradually be introduced.
I'm a little skeptical. I remember being in a room in Dallas in 1995 when they first had, when they promised me this, that I could just talk to my phone and she would know everything. And I don't know. I'm feeling that gap. I'm feeling the gap.
Has anybody here used Alexa from Amazon? The voice? It's awesome, right?
Couple.
I mean, if you're
No, a couple.
So if you're a Prime customer, the entire music database of Amazon is available to you. You sit down and you go, Amazon, play the Beatles, or Alexa, play the Beatles, and it's just this random assortment of songs. The technology's come a long way since those Dallas days.
Yeah.
So we're getting there. We're coming down to the end of our session. I'm going to come to each of you and ask you 3 really practical things for our customers and our partners that are here. Monday morning, what should they be thinking about, or what should they be doing to kind of get their head around 5G and the impact it's going to have on their businesses? Terry, starting with you.
Well, I think the first thing you need to do is make sure that you use the latest technology.
Yeah.
Play with it. Use it yourself. Don't delegate finding these things out to other people, and don't think because you're not a millennial that you should, excuse yourself from this. And whether it is some of the Internet of Things, whether it's the experiences of social networks, get your hands dirty with these things, because you can't think about these things in the abstract. You need to know what works and doesn't work and how it changes your experience. And I think that's the first thing. The second thing is encourage your organization to bring new skills in there. Yes. Don't depend on just suppliers to bring you new ideas. You need to go and educate your organization and train your organization. And finally, it's never too early to start doing these new things. So start with some small projects, perhaps confined. As you say, maybe you need to have a part of your IT organization that's going to go do these things. An accelerator or an incubator within your business that takes small bite-sized projects and does something with it now that has real business impact. I think those are the three things I would
good
suggest.
practical advice. Sheila?
So I think number one is to go back and see how many channels am I making available to my customers coming into the contact center, and how unified and integrated is that? And I think sometimes companies have said, well, I opened up email and it's only like 2 or 3%, or I opened up web chat, it's only 2 or 3%. I think what you're going to find is as you open up all of those channels, SMS and text and social, that they're going to rise in importance and be that 50-50 point. So number one is, what channels do I have, and what's my plan to bring them all into the contact center in an integrated way so I have a single picture of what's going on. Number two is, how am I hiring? When was the last time I looked at my hiring practices for agents, right? What am I requiring? And what am I looking for that tech savvy? Am I looking for that multitasking? Because, honestly, it was funny. There was a presentation recently where somebody from an airline came and told us that they had not hired an agent in 10 years. And it's because, and you may be in a similar situation. Why? Because voice volumes have been declining, and so you don't have to necessarily be hiring in. But what you're ending up with is perhaps people with older skills. In fact, this particular airline said, we gave a mouse to this team, and they put it on the screen. I'm like, I'm not quite sure who you're dealing with here. Maybe it really is time to retire some of those agents. Okay, so take a look at your hiring, and just make sure that you're hiring now for the 5G world of tomorrow. And then the third thing that I would say is, if you didn't raise your hand and know that there is an IoT effort in your business, take that as a to-do. Find out, because I have a feeling it might be a little higher than 20%.
Great, thank you, Sheila. CS, last word to you.
So this is a really important question that you asked, and probably the most important question that you asked for the people in this audience, because the world is changing fast, and the skill sets must change. And so just like when I started my career as a Windows guy working with a bunch of IBM mainframe guys, 5 years later, there was no mainframe guys left. I then progressed my career. I decided I was going to get into, I tried doing voice over frame, I think I told you in 95, right, or 97. A few years after that, hardly any voice guys left. This is the same progression. We are moving into a mobile-first world. It's critically important that you change your own skill sets. That means big data, analytics. There is a huge lack of analytics and data science people out there today. Any company that has them overpays them because they got to keep them, and any company that doesn't is always trying to poach them, right? There's more and more programming skills that are needed. Python, Ruby, those types of modern programming language. But most importantly, change the culture within the company to always question the status quo. When you live in a mobile-first world, there are better ways. Whatever processes you guys do, I guarantee you, mobility can change that process and make it better. And I think for your own career, your own organization's health, you must adopt this mobile-first world, because that's the direction we're heading in. And the skill sets, I mean, you got to look at evaluate the talent that you have and make sure you have the right people that understand cloud, that understand IoT, that understand data sciences and analytics. Those are the skill sets that you're going to need moving forward. It's not, the day of like spending hours and hours configuring PBXs and routers and switches. That's all becoming automated. So it's freeing up time to do other more important things.
Innovate, adapt, or die, right? Back where we started from this morning. On behalf of all of us, thank you to Zeus and to Sheila, our special guests, and to Terry, as always, for teaching us so much about the world of mobile that we're living in and moving toward. Zeus and Sheila are here for the rest of the day. You can follow Zeus on Twitter at Zman.
Caravella.
Z Caravella?
Yeah.
Okay. And Sheila at McGee Smith. But they're here for the day. If you have questions, feel free to approach them now or after the fact. And Terry, as always, will be around forever. Thank you. Thank you all.
Until 70.
Yes.
Always. I don't think I need this. I'll give it to Josh. Thanks. Pretty interesting stuff. If you took nothing else away, 5G, 25% better than 4G. We talked a lot about universities and university segment earlier, and gosh, I can just see my daughter having to put up with guys surrounded by her that are dropping off a drone with a new keg of beer when the tap, the IoT indicator on the tap says we're out. So that scares me a little bit, all these new opportunities. But all seriousness, I think you see this intersection between cloud, mobile. Graham talked earlier about analytics, performance analytics. He talked about security. These worlds really are coming together.